Welcome to Life Stories, where we share inspiring tales of love, compassion, and unexpected connections. Today, we bring you the story of Eleanor, a wise grandmother who, in a bid to find true love for her grandson, sets in motion a chain of events that will change not only his life but the life of a kind-hearted woman. It's a tale about discovering what truly matters and the profound impact that one act of kindness can have. Sit back, relax, and enjoy as we begin today's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated with more heartwarming stories. It was an ordinary Thursday morning when Eleanor, with her silver hair tied neatly in a bun, decided to make an extraordinary change in her life. A woman who had lived through the highs and lows of life. She was about to embark on a mission that would not only affect her own future but the future of her grandson, Nathan, a man she adored and feared for in equal measure. Eleanor had been watching Nathan for years. A hard-working man, Nathan had inherited his family's wealth, a thriving business empire in the heart of New York City. But there was something missing in his life. He was always surrounded by business meetings, investment proposals, and the endless hum of the city. But in all of that hustle and bustle, there was one thing that slipped through the cracks: love. At nearly 40, Nathan was still single. It wasn't that he didn't have options. No, Nathan had been pursued by the best of society. Beautiful women, wealthy women, ambitious women. But Eleanor saw through it all. She saw the way they gazed at Nathan with a hunger not for his heart, but for his bank account. They weren't interested in Nathan himself. They were interested in what he could offer them. This realization gnawed at Eleanor's heart. She knew that her grandson deserved more than a woman who simply wanted to sit in the shadow of his fortune. He deserved someone who could look past his wealth. Someone who could care for him without any pretense. But how could she find such a woman for him? How could she be sure that the woman who crossed Nathan's path was the right one? That's when the idea came to her. Eleanor had spent a lifetime navigating the world's superficialities, the glittering masks that people wear to hide their true selves. She knew that appearances often deceived, and she wasn't going to let Nathan fall into the same trap. She would find someone who would truly care for him, not for the riches that came with him, but she would have to do it subtly, and the best way was to become someone unrecognizable to the world. And so, she made a decision that would change everything. Eleanor, dressed in a faded cream dress and a mismatched scarf wrapped around her neck, looked nothing like the matriarch she was. With her cane tapping gently against the polished marble floors, she walked into a high-end fashion boutique. One of those places where the salespeople spoke with a cool, practiced tone and the merchandise gleamed with an unapproachable elegance. She knew it wouldn't be easy. People like her, people who had seen the world, loved and lost, and weathered life's storms, didn't belong in places like this. But that was exactly the point. Eleanor had been to enough galas and soirees to know that wealth and status had become commodities. But kindness, real kindness, was a rarity. She needed to know how Nathan's future wife would treat her. Would she care, or would she turn her nose up at the elderly woman in front of her? Just as the two women standing nearby already had? The laughter rang out. Amanda and Vivian, two women who had been whispering about Eleanor as she entered the store, exchanged knowing glances. Eleanor could hear their conversation, their mockery directed at her. "She's probably lost," Amanda said. "Maybe she thinks this is a second-hand store." Eleanor didn't flinch. She smiled politely and continued walking, past racks of expensive clothes, ignoring the sneers and the whispers. She had come here for a purpose. It wasn't about the clothes, it was about seeing how others treated her. She wasn't deterred. Not in the least. Her mission was clear, and she would not let the petty judgments of others cloud her resolve. As she browsed through the store, Eleanor noticed the manager, a tall, stern-looking man, eyeing her with disbelief. He approached her, his voice polite but firm. "Ma'am, I'm afraid this is a high-end fashion store. Perhaps you're in the wrong place." Eleanor didn't miss a beat. She leaned on her cane, her voice soft but unwavering. "I'm just looking. I'm a paying customer, you know." But the manager was insistent. "I'm sorry, ma'am, if you're not making a purchase, I'm afraid you'll have to leave. Something inside Eleanor flared up. She wasn't going to be dismissed so easily. I'm not leaving, young man, she said with a firmness that surprised even her. I've come to buy, and that's exactly what I intend to do. She picked up a scarf, simple and elegant, and held it up in front of the manager. The two women, Amanda and Vivian, were still watching from the side, their sneers now audible in the still air. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. But she didn't let it show. She was no stranger to confrontation. Then, the worst of it happened. Vivian stepped forward, her voice dripping with disdain. Why would the security even let you come into a store like this? She sneered. You look ridiculous. Go back to wherever you came from. Eleanor felt a sharp sting at the words. But her spirit wasn't broken. She dropped the scarf onto the counter, her hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the injustice she had just witnessed. How dare you speak to me like that? She said, her voice trembling with righteous anger. Don't you have any respect for your elders? For a moment, both Amanda and Vivian were taken aback, surprised by Eleanor's response. But Vivian quickly regained her composure. I don't care if you're old or whatever. She spat. You don't belong here. Eleanor, despite her age, stood her ground. With a swift motion, she turned on her heel, ready to leave, but as she made her way to the door, something unexpected happened. Vivian, unable to resist her cruelty, shoved Eleanor from behind. The elderly woman stumbled, lost her balance, and collapsed to the floor with a sickening thud. The laughter in the store ceased immediately. There was a silence that hung thick in the air. Amanda and Vivian stood frozen, their faces suddenly pale, as though they had realized too late what they had done. The other customers stood, eyes wide in shock, but no one moved to help. Except for Rachel, a young woman who had just entered the store rushed to Eleanor's side without hesitation. She knelt beside the elderly woman, her heart racing. Someone help! Rachel shouted. Please, someone help! But as Eleanor's lifeless form lay there, cold and unresponsive, Vivian, still indifferent, sneered. Why bother? She's old. Let her die. Rachel's face turned crimson with anger and disbelief. How could someone be so heartless? But she didn't let it stop her. She knelt beside Eleanor, starting chest compressions, desperate to bring her back. In that moment, Rachel knew that Eleanor wasn't just another elderly woman. There was something more to her than what met the eye. The ambulance arrived just in time. Rachel, her hands trembling from the shock of what had happened, continued to work tirelessly, her every movement a testament to the determination that surged through her veins. She had never expected to find herself in this situation, never imagined that a simple visit to a boutique would lead her to save a life. But here she was, her heart racing as Eleanor was carefully lifted into the ambulance, still unconscious but alive. As the doors closed, Rachel stood back, watching as the paramedics sped away. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was this elderly woman? What had happened in the store? And why had Rachel felt such a strong need to help her? There was something about Eleanor, something deep within her that pulled at Rachel's heartstrings. But she had no answers. Only an unsettling feeling that this encounter was far from over. Rachel followed the ambulance to the hospital, her mind still reeling. She had barely entered the emergency room when a nurse approached her. You saved her life, the nurse said softly, her voice full of gratitude. You're a hero. But Rachel didn't feel like a hero. She just did what anyone would have done. What struck her was the way the doctors and nurses began treating Eleanor with a kind of reverence. She was wheeled into a private room, surrounded by a team of specialists. And the medical staff moved with a sense of urgency that Rachel hadn't expected for an elderly woman. This wasn't just any patient. This was someone important. Later, as Rachel paced the waiting room, her thoughts still tangled in confusion, she overheard a conversation between two nurses. Did you hear who the patient is? One nurse asked the other. It's Mrs. Eleanor Kingsley, George Kingsley's grandmother. Rachel froze. George Kingsley. She had heard the name before. He was the CEO of one of the wealthiest companies in the country. But she couldn't understand why Eleanor, A frail elderly woman, would be so closely tied to him. She had no idea that this elderly woman, whose life she had just saved, was part of one of the most influential families in the country. Her thoughts were interrupted when a nurse approached her, smiling gently. "You're the one who brought Mrs. Kingsley in, aren't you?" the nurse asked. "She's doing much better now. But I'm sure her family will want to thank you personally." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "Family?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Who is she?" The nurse hesitated, glancing around before speaking in a hushed tone. "Mrs. Kingsley is George Kingsley's grandmother. She's an incredibly important woman. You might not know this, but she has a legacy of her own. And I'm sure George will want to thank you when he hears about what you did." Rachel's mind swirled with disbelief. She had saved the grandmother of one of the most powerful men in the country. How was that possible? She couldn't quite process it. But one thing was clear. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. The next day, as Rachel sat anxiously in the waiting room, she couldn't shake the sense that everything was happening too fast. She had come to the hospital expecting nothing more than a brief, meaningful encounter with an elderly woman. And now she was caught in a whirlwind. Eleanor's family, especially her grandson, would want to express their gratitude. And Rachel wasn't sure how to handle that. As she waited, she found herself thinking of George Kingsley. The name echoed in her mind. The powerful CEO. The man who had inherited his family's empire. The man who could have anyone he wanted. Someone who probably didn't need someone like her in his life. But then, Rachel reminded herself that none of this was about her. It was about Eleanor. About saving her life. About showing compassion in a world that seemed to have forgotten how to care. Yet, deep down, she couldn't help but feel the pull of something more. Something that had only just begun to stir inside her. The hours seemed to drag on as Rachel sat in the waiting room, her mind racing with a whirlwind of thoughts. She had always prided herself on her ability to stay calm in stressful situations. But this one was different. She had never expected something as profound as this to happen. Never imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead her down a path that was about to intersect with one of the wealthiest families in the country. She had barely come to terms with the fact that she had saved Mrs. Kingsley. Eleanor, the grandmother of George Kingsley. When a nurse appeared at the door. "You're the one who helped Mrs. Kingsley, right?" the nurse asked with a warm smile. Rachel nodded, a bit sheepishly. "Yes, I just did what anyone would have done." The nurse's expression softened. "You did more than that. You saved her life. And now, it's only a matter of time before her family knows what you've done." Rachel's heart raced. She hadn't done it for recognition. She had done it because she couldn't stand by and do nothing. But hearing the words made her realize how significant her actions were, and how much they had already begun to impact her life. Soon, Eleanor regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open in the private room, and she blinked in confusion before her surroundings became clear. She wasn't in the boutique anymore, she was in a hospital. The soft beeping of machines filled the room, and the sterile scent of the hospital seemed foreign to her, despite having spent her fair share of time in places like this. "Where am I?" Eleanor whispered, her voice weak. "You're in the hospital," a nurse replied gently. "You took quite a fall. But you're safe now." Eleanor's mind cleared as she took in the information. And soon her focus shifted to something more pressing. "The girl," she said softly, "the one who brought me here. Where is she?" The nurse, who had been standing nearby, smiled warmly. "She's in the waiting room. But I'll have someone fetch her for you." Eleanor smiled, a look of gratitude crossing her face. She knew what she had to do now. The events of the day had been a whirlwind, and she knew her health wouldn't allow her to take too much time to rest. The task she had set for herself had only just begun. Rachel stood in the waiting room, lost in thought. She had hoped to take a moment to process everything that had happened. But the weight of the situation kept pressing down on her. Just as she was about to slip into a chair, a nurse approached her. "Mrs. Kingsley would like to see you. She's asking for you." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know what to expect. What could Mrs. Kingsley want from her now? When Rachel entered the room, Eleanor greeted her with a soft smile. "Thank you, my dear. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you saved my life." Rachel smiled awkwardly, still unsure of how to respond. "I didn't do much. I couldn't let you lie there." Eleanor's eyes softened with gratitude. "You did more than anyone else would. You gave me another chance." Rachel blinked, surprised by the depth of the woman's words. She hadn't expected this kind of connection, hadn't expected to feel so profoundly moved by someone she had just met. But Eleanor wasn't finished. As the two women spoke, Eleanor's expression grew more serious, more determined. "I want to repay you. Rachel, you've shown me a kindness that not many people would. I want to ask you something very important." Rachel tilted her head, a hint of curiosity creeping into her heart. "What is it?" Eleanor's gaze grew intense. "I want you to meet my grandson, George." Rachel's eyes widened. "George Kingsley?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. She had heard of him, everyone had. He was one of the most powerful men in the country. A businessman with connections that reached across the globe. But what could he possibly want with someone like her? Eleanor's smile was knowing, almost mischievous. "Yes, my dear. George has been so focused on his work that he hasn't made time for love. But I believe you're the one who could change that. I've watched you, and I know you're the right person for him." Rachel was taken aback. She had never considered herself a suitable match for someone like George Kingsley. She was just a woman with a kind heart. An ordinary woman in an extraordinary world. The idea of marrying someone like him felt too much. Too fast. "But I don't know him," she said, her voice faltering. Eleanor's eyes were filled with a quiet understanding. "I know, my dear, but I can see something in you. I believe that if you meet him, you'll see it too." Rachel wasn't sure what to think. Everything had happened so quickly. She had been drawn into a world she didn't understand. A world of wealth, power, and expectations. But there was something about Eleanor's words. Something about the way the older woman looked at her. That made her pause. Eleanor believed in her. That belief, in itself, was a gift. And for the first time in a long while, Rachel wondered if perhaps she was ready to take a leap of faith. As the days passed, Rachel found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of meeting George Kingsley. The thought of marrying someone she didn't know, someone as powerful and wealthy as he was, still felt overwhelming. Yet, the kindness in Eleanor's eyes, the trust she had placed in her, began to change something within her. Rachel wasn't sure what the future held, but she had already witnessed how small acts of kindness could ripple through lives, creating connections where none had existed before. The meeting with George came soon after. They sat across from each other at a quiet, elegant restaurant, their conversation awkward at first but slowly becoming more genuine. Rachel began to see George not just as a businessman but as a man who, despite his wealth and stature, was still searching for something real, something that could give his life meaning beyond the numbers and deadlines. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew. George, who had once been closed off and focused solely on work, found solace in Rachel's warmth and authenticity. Slowly, they began to understand each other in ways that went beyond surface appearances. They shared stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future, and the mutual understanding that love wasn't something that could be rushed or forced. It was something that had to grow organically. And so, over time, as they navigated the ups and downs of their newfound relationship, George and Rachel discovered a love that was real, built on respect, kindness, and the willingness to take risks for the chance of something beautiful. If you've enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming life stories. Thank you for being part of this journey.